say they found 16 guns in the shooter's hotel room, including rifles with scopes. Some of them were modified to make them fully automatic. And at Paddock's home, authorities found 18 more guns, explosive, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. For more on the gun debate, former Chicago police officer and law enforcement analyst Dimitri Roberts joins us now from Washington. So, Dimitri, we don't know exactly what kind of weapons the gunman had, but as we've heard from witness video, the shots came in rapid-fire bursts, perhaps from an automatic weapon. Tell us about procuring a weapon like that. Can a quote-unquote average person get a weapon like that?
Well, absolutely, as we've seen, not just in the Las Vegas massacre, but in other massacres throughout the country, in most cases, there's been automatic weapons that have been used. So, again, I think what we should be focused on is not just who's getting the weapons, but the kind of weapons that they have access to. But yes, as it stands today, any average citizen that can get a gun can get an automatic weapon. And those are some of the issues that I think we need to focus on, not just at the local, gun distribution level, but on the national level.
And as a former law enforcement officer, what's your view on civilians owning weapons like that?
Well, it should absolutely not be the case. Military-grade weapons, weapons that are manufactured specifically for the purposes of going to war, going into combat, shouldn't be in the hands of civilians. And I've seen that on both sides, both as a law enforcement officer and as a military member. And in this case, as crass as it may sound, the weapon did what it was supposed to do. It inflicted mass destruction from a distance. And until we start focusing on the sanctity of human life over profitability, then we're going to continue to see these issues, because that's really what this comes down to, Elaine.
What do you say, Dimitri, to gun rights advocates who would argue that telling someone what kind of weapon they can own is a slippery slope to then perhaps telling them whether or not they can own a weapon at all?
Well, again, I come back to the value of human life, and it's a slippery slope, but it's an even further slippery slope when folks are dying. So to folks that say, I want to have the right to bear the arms that I want to have, I think that's great, but we have to do it within a reasonable factor, within having some reason behind that. So if we take a more reasonable approach, I think we can find sensible solutions that all people can stand behind, not just gun owners or those that want to advocate for more stricter gun laws and gun policies, but all of us as Americans in this country can say we want to focus on protecting our citizens and we want to protect ourselves, and we can find that balance, I think.
We still do not know what the motive may have been for this particular shooting in Las Vegas. We know the suspect, Paddock, had no past criminal record. Do you think that there needs to be monitoring somehow of people who have that many weapons as Paddock did in this case?
Well, I think there could be, but I think that's going to be very difficult to get done. What I do know is that anybody that wants the amount of guns that they want to have or they want to collect, they're going to get them, whether that's policy or whether that's law or not. There's a criminal element in every major city in this country, and they seem to find access to troves of weapons and that aren't necessarily purchased legally. So I think where we can spend our efforts is focusing on the right weapons getting in the right people's hands for the right reasons. And again, I think that has everything to do with the type of weapons that both civilians as well as law enforcement folks have an opportunity to have. And I think that's where we need to be focusing our efforts and our attention, but as well as creating some better policies around those issues.
What are you most interested in learning about the shooter from a law enforcement perspective?
One would be motive, two would be what his background is, and three, what was his circle of influence. As we know in most cases, folks have started to trend down a path of down a path that leads to these type of massacres and this type of destruction. So I would be very interested to talk to his friends and family and those that are around him and those that had continuing contact with him to see if this was an isolated incident or was this something that he alluded to in the past or even had conversations with friends about. I think that's important to look at from an investigative perspective, but it's also important to look at from a broader mental health perspective when it comes to us dealing with these issues on a national level.
All right, Dimitri Roberts, thank you so much for your perspective, Dimitri. Appreciate it.